Good morning. We're going to start. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 170195, 170196, 170197, and resolution number 170213. Mr. Stitt, please read the titles of the bills and resolution.
Bill number 170195, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2018 through 2023 inclusive. Bill number 170196, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2018 capital budget. Bill number 170197, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2018. Resolution number 170213, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2018 through 2022 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2017, which is to be submitted by the Mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this Council approved by the Mayor on January 3, 1992, Bill number 1563-A, by and between the City and the authority.
Thank you. Today we continue the public hearing on the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2018, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2018 through fiscal 2023. Today we will hear testimony from the following departments: Planning and Development, Mural Arts, and Office of Innovation and Technology. Mr. Stitt, who's the first person to testify?
Ann Fedulin.
Thank you so much. Ms. Fedulin, would you please approach the witness table? Morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks. Good morning, Council President Clark and members of City Council. My name is Ann Fedulin. I'm Director of the Office of Planning and Development. Here today with me are Kathy Califano, the Deputy Director of Planning and Development, Fred Purnell, the Deputy Director of Housing and Development, and Eleanor Sharp, the incoming Deputy Director for Planning and Zoning. As you all are well aware, this body introduced legislation for a charter change that was then approved by the voters in November of 2015 to establish the Department of Planning and Development. Although the department was not to be established fully until July 1, 2017, the start of fiscal year 18, there was an executive order signed by Mayor Kenny, January 4, 2016, that set up the Office of Planning and Development. What you'll see reflected in the fiscal year 18 budget is the roll-up of all these departments into the new Department of Planning and Development. Included in the general fund budget are the Planning Commission, the Historic Commission, the Art Commission, the Zoning Board of Adjustment that moves over from L&I, Development Services, and the Division of Housing and Community Development, what was formerly the Office of Housing and Community Development. We made, even though the charter change doesn't take full effect until July 1, 2017, we've already made a lot of progress to date in coordinating the work of these agencies. This is evidenced by the Land Bank Strategic Plan. This is something where the Planning Commission and Land Bank folks and others worked hand in hand to create that, the workforce housing work that has been going on, the successful completion of the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Plan, and the ongoing work that we're doing now in preparing the consolidated plan that will be submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In addition to the coordination that's been going on between the planning entities and the housing agencies, our Division of Development Services has also expanded its role to include service to affordable housing developers, small business entities, and projects being pursued by the Philadelphia Housing Authority. The Historic Commission has relocated its offices to 1515 Arch Street, and the Zoning Board of Adjustment moved to 1515 Arch Street to the 18th floor is in the works. We're fully immersed in this process of establishing a unified department. We feel that by July 1, 2017, we will have made significant headway although we do believe it's going to take us probably at least till the end of the fiscal year to get fully established as one coordinated and unified department. That being said, fiscal year 17 has been a very productive year for all these agencies under the planning and development umbrella. In particular, Division of Development Services, they're responsible for guiding developers and investors through the city's various development processes. As mentioned above, the division has expanded its service to assist more of the development community that is most in need of these services, which again includes small business, community, and housing developers. The department and the division also, in some way, shape, or form, touches nearly every aspect of the $7 billion of construction going on currently within the city. The Division of Housing and Community Development, as we mentioned again, completed the assessment of affirmatively furthering housing in cooperation and coordination with the Philadelphia Housing Authority. This is one of the first times in memory that the city housing agencies and the Philadelphia Housing Authority have worked in coordination and cooperation to submit a unified plan to HUD. We are also proud that this plan was accepted by HUD, and we're the first major city in the country to have that happen. As part of that process, we had a very robust community engagement piece. We collected over 5,000 surveys. We held numerous focus groups and stakeholder meetings, and we felt that that process was so successful that we are continuing that stakeholder engagement as we pursue the consolidated plan process. Also, in support of continuing affordable rental housing, we have issued 2 RFPs, one for preservation and one for 4% low-income housing tax credit projects. We will also soon be issuing an additional RFP for new development seeking 9% tax credits, and that RFP will give priority to developments that are in what we call high opportunity areas, and we're going to use some of the funds that were contributed to the Housing Trust Fund by the One Water Street settlement to pursue that end. Further, in order to stem the tide of evictions, we're going to investigate ways that we may be able to provide legal assistance to tenants, similar in form to what we do currently for homeowners through our mortgage foreclosure prevention program. Also, and definitely not least, thanks to the transfer tax increase that was approved by City Council, the city is preparing to issue $100 million in home improvement bonds. The first set of the bonds, $20 million of the $60 million, will be issued this summer, but we're not waiting for this issuance as activity to address the backlog of homes in basic system repair, weatherization, and the adaptive modification programs is well underway. This week, $1 million in work was released to contractors to begin to tackle this backlog. We anticipate with these additional funds that we will be able to service approximately 7,400 homeowners under this program in fiscal year 18. And we are working to eliminate the backlog of these programs within the next 3 years. Even with the amount of this investment, we're not able to address all the homeowners in need. Therefore, there will be an additional $40 million bond issued to develop a loan program to help homeowners whose income is just above the limit for the grant dollars. Many of these homeowners live in our middle neighborhoods. Planning and Development will continue to work with City Council over the summer to finalize this program, and we anticipate this bond issue happening in the fall of 2017. Further activity to address the needs of middle neighborhoods will be the continuation of our nationally recognized mortgage foreclosure prevention program, which saved its 10,000th home from foreclosure this fiscal year. In addition, we will be working with the Reinvestment Fund to assess data around issues homeowners are experiencing with reverse mortgages, particularly our seniors. The Land Bank was activated this year, completing an update to its strategic plan and acquiring more than 1,800 properties via transfer from other public agencies and approving the sale of more than $1 million in property. In fiscal year 18, the Land Bank intends to acquire an additional 1,700 properties, both through transfers and by exercising its acquisition powers. We intend to dispose of 325 properties to support a variety of uses. The Workforce Housing Program, administered by the Land Bank and again championed by this body, has awarded 121 properties to create 190 103 new housing units, of which 143 are affordable to households earning 120% of AMI or below. Further, the division supports one of the key goals of the County Administration and of City Council, that of assisting returning citizens. We do this through the Land Care Program. The program is administered by the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and has employed over 40 returning citizens and cleaned and maintained 2,400 lots. The Division of Planning and Zoning has also been active this year. Planning Commission has completed 15 of 18 district plans and will complete all 18 plans by the end of fiscal year 18. In cooperation with the housing agencies, the Commission is now working on a community development implementation strategy focused on moving these plans from vision to reality. The Commission will continue to work with City Council to pursue remapping in conjunction with the district plans and perform plan reviews and zoning code amendments to promote the thoughtful and coordinated growth of Philadelphia. Working with other city departments, the Commission has prepared the capital program and budget in close coordination with the Budget Office. The highlight of the capital program is the proposed cap and park over I-95 to connect the city with its waterfront. This project has already attracted more than $100 million in state and private funding and will spur almost $300 million in private investment, create 390 construction jobs and 365 permanent jobs. Evidence of the impact of this project is the recent acquisition of Piers 12 through 24 by Durst Companies. It's the first time in its history, over 100-year history, that has purchased properties outside New York State. The Commission makes best efforts to align the capital program and budget to the 2035 citywide vision. Citizens Planning Institute has completed its 14th semester educating and engaging community residents. By the end of the current class, CPI will have graduated 400 citizen planners. More than just educating them, CPI encourages these graduates to take what they've learned to be ambassadors in their communities. We're very proud of this program because the best planned and developed communities are those with educated and empowered mix of RCOs, civic associations, and residents. The Historical Commission continues to review a record number of building permit requests for alterations of or construction on historic properties. In fiscal year 18, Planning and Development will work with Historic Commission staff to identify performance metrics. With 2 additional staff positions, the Commission will be able to take a more proactive and strategic role in pursuing properties and districts for historic designation. In fiscal year 18, the Zoning Board of Adjustment will move into the Department of Planning and Development. We look forward to coordinating our work with that of the ZBA and expect the ZBA to have another very busy year. They anticipate reviewing 1,200 cases in the coming year. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not address the dire need for additional housing resources. You are all aware that the proposed federal budget may dramatically impact our local resources. Regardless of what HUD looks like, we still need to provide services for our citizens and meet basic housing needs. Because I know you all agree with me when I say quality, affordable housing is a moral right. While we're gearing up to manage the challenges of reduced resources, and we thank you for the work you did to provide more dollars for home repair, we know we need to move faster because too many families are in need today. We need to challenge ourselves to find new ways to partner and invest in our neighborhoods and communities. We need to come together as a community and realize we cannot be the city we know we are unless we make taking care of each other our top priority. We look forward to working with Council to consider new ideas and strategies for increasing resources to meet the housing and community needs of our residents. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony. We're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Fadulin. Ms. Fadulin, your testimony was so riveting and inclusive that I don't have any questions to ask you. I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, I think it'll take about 15 seconds to get over that.
I got a couple. And we got a full board, so you'll be busy today. One that sticks out page, I guess, section 54 on page 47, the references PHS, and actually the mayor and myself, we attended a graduation ceremony last week at Horticultural Society for, I think, around 20 individuals that went through this program, and they were excited. Families were there, the whole 9 yards. And both myself and the mayor talked about how great the program is, but then in the budget, it shows a reduction of $500,000. So, you know, we're sending the appropriate message when we go to the graduation ceremony, but not the appropriate message when we reduce the budget.
Right, so we were hoping that we would get level funding for that and continue to have those dollars available. Unfortunately, I guess based on the pressures on the budget, that was not the case.
When you say we, you're referencing just your department or the administration?
So I'm saying our department was hoping for the funding to remain, and when I say we, it's the administration.
So we should be pointing the fingers at the administration. Although I thought you were a part of that, but all right.
We're a team, what can I tell you?
All right, okay. That might come back to bite you, but fine. Okay, so your request, your preference was to have the $500,000.
Yes.
So we can include this very worthy program.
Yes.
Thank you. Maybe we have to do like we did before. We took it out of the prison budget and put it in this budget. So,
well,
okay,
you know, I would.
We know what to do.
I'm editorializing. I would rather see us invest in our returning citizens than invest in our prison system.
We know what to do. Another one I'm a little concerned about, and I'm not clear on this. Section 13, page 4, talks about, on the budget details, a $22 million reduction in the Choice Neighborhood Grant. Is that the Choice Neighborhood Grant that we already got?
Yes.
So
yes.
We got a $30 million Choice Neighborhood Grant 2-3 years ago, and there's a possibility of taking that commitment back?
No, I think what that reflects is where we are in the process with that grant. That
I don't understand.
do you have any, Paul?
Right, that's the uncommitted balance.
So the 22 of the 30 million is committed. Is that accurate? Yeah, is committed, and then the remaining balance is what still remains to be committed. We are not giving that money back.
All right, but we better hurry up and spend it, though.
Yes, but we need to spend it. Yes, we have been working. So, you know, that's an excellent example of how the Division of Development Services, the Division of Housing and Community Development, and the Philadelphia Housing Authority are really working in much stronger coordination now. There was an issue with those projects being held up because of various development issues that we are all now working very much together to make sure that all those issues are resolved so that building permits are in place. So we are looking at mid-May to break ground.
For 9th Street,
Yeah.
for the Norris replacement housing?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So another issue, we kind of referenced it last week. We had a conversation about parking, about electric vehicles and all of that. But the reality is that there's a broader issue about parking, and some of us who live or represent some neighborhoods where we're experiencing significant growth, although there is others that are not experiencing any growth, and it's actually going the other way per the Pew report that was issued, and that's of some significant concern. This issue about some years ago, there was a change in the ratio about parking spaces provided per unit, and I didn't agree with it then. I don't agree with it now. That they basically, it's like for every 10 units you only had to have 3 parking spaces or something. I forget. And this notion that people, in the testimony last year was the response, well, people need to get on the train. They need to get on a bus. And I'm not going to say who said that, but I mean, some people are not going to get on the train, they're not going to get on the bus. And this notion that all the new people moving in don't have cars is just a fallacy. What are we going to do about this parking issue?
Right.
It is a problem everywhere. And I mean, to the point where you have people literally riding around the block 4 or 5. We heard some of the testimony when we were talking about the electric vehicles. Is there going to be some planning strategy to, maybe reduce the growth rate in terms of number of units allowed on a building? Like I know right now, in neighborhoods, there used to be 2 stories, and I know Councilman Johnson was talking about this for some time, but now it's all the neighborhoods where 2-story blocks, now they're like 4 and 5 stories and, multiple units, and it's like out of control.
Yeah. So I think,
Councilwoman, so are we going to like have a serious conversation about this, or are we just going to keep telling people to get on the bus and
No.
don't drive?
I think we are seeing the same issues that you're experiencing. And so, as a matter of fact, we put in a grant application to the Mayor's Fund to do a parking study, particularly around areas where there's significant development happening or around universities. Unfortunately, we were not successful in that grant application, so we are trying to identify resources that would be available for us to look more closely at the parking issue, because we agree with you that it's an issue and we need to take a look, and if we can't find external resources, we're going to have to do the best we can in-house to look at that issue. In reference to the...
So is that tells me that it's not a priority to some people. They're not going to give you money. All right. I like the way you testify. You knew, you haven't been indoctrinated yet. All right. So,
and as reference to the 2-story issue, do you want to? So I think we are working with Councilman Johnson's office around that too. We've had a couple meetings in his office where we sort of brought the whole herd over to look at what we can do. We've talked about maybe a neighborhood conservation district, something like that, and we're still in talks to try to figure out how we accommodate growth, but in a way that really makes more sense. I have to say, just personally, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 months ago, there was a group of high school students in Point Breeze, and a group of us went out and walked the neighborhood with them. And they showed us examples, one that was just so egregious of, it looked like a 6-story home next to a 2-story home. It probably wasn't, but that's what it looked like. And then they explained to us what it felt like to them to be growing up in that community and then seeing that, and it just felt like a slap in the face to them. And I think we realize that this is a serious issue, and we look forward to working with Councilman Johnson on it. And if it's an issue in Councilwoman Blackwell's office, we would like to work on it with her as well.
Well, you come over
and
to
if
mine.
it's an issue in your office,
We got a little situation
everybody's
over
office
I mean,
will work, yeah.
the
So I think it's something we definitely need to address.
Yeah, 1400 block of Myrtlewood Street in Brewerytown, that block that there was some tension around
Right.
the revenue department.
Yeah.
I'll
And I
deal
think,
with the
one of the...
deciding, hold on, let me finish my
Yeah,
setup here.
one of the things I think we're looking at in the omnibus zoning bill was this idea of where things are zoned industrial in a residential neighborhood, where, there's cherry picking going on kind of with the zoning, as they want to build residential housing, but they want a lot of the allowances that you get in an industrial district, and they're kind of have a foot in both worlds, and we're trying to figure out where that happens and get in front of it. So, and I know Councilman Squill has been a great help in that, in trying to make some adjustments so that people don't build 55 or 60-story structures by right that are really residential, but they happen to have some underlying industrial.
Okay, so
zoning.
now the zoning board under the new structure is now under
Yes.
your purview. So my assumption is that you will have more influence on the policy associated with the zoning
We
board.
like to say that those are independent boards, but yes, we do work very closely with them already to assess where, what variances are being requested, what variances are being granted. Do we see things that happen over and over again that generally have community support and councilmanic support that we can rectify? But yes, we look forward to having a very good relationship with them. Eleanor and I went over and met with their staff on Friday. I think we had a really good meet and greet and get to know you, and we really look forward to having them join our team. We think they're a great bunch of people, and we're thrilled that they agreed to come over as an intact team to be part of our department.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
All right. And it should be, to some degree, consistent with the policy established by planning right?
That
When
is
we
our,
plan and
that is our
recommend-
aim,
Mr.
yes.
Dole,
That is our aim.
You can't out-talk me. So, I'm serious about this, because
Yeah.
some of these neighborhoods are getting to be unbearable. And
Right.
people are excited about growth and the whole 9 yards, but the last 4 zoning hearings in Fishtown, the people came down in droves and opposed it because they can't live over there anymore. It's like ridiculous. So, Planning Commission does this analysis. They recommend residential communities, single-family homes. They go to the zoning board to get approval to do something totally different. So now,
Right, so
that-
we have been in contact prior to the Zoning Board of Adjustment coming over to our department to talk about those issues with them. We have held trainings with them. We will continue to do that, but yes, we believe it will be helpful that they will be under our purview.
all right, thank you. All right, I'm going to pass it on to my good friend and colleague. And I want to first recognize our good friends, the advocates here. I think we pretty much agree with every sign that's being held here. We acknowledge you. It's important. Trust us. Trust it. All right. Thank you for coming down. Thank you. All right. I'd like to turn over to my good friend and colleague, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to echo what the President talked about. It's almost like the tale of two cities. In parts of my district, if we were to open a dollar store, it's like a happy day. We're cutting ribbons and we're doing that kind of thing. There are parts of my district, Manayunk, East Falls, and even Roxborough now, that every patch of ground is being gone after by developers. And when in '08, when we started this zoning reform where we reduced the paperwork from this much to this much, and we created that by right syndrome, I call it. It was not just by right, it's by the way, here's what's going on in our neighborhoods. So we wake up and we see construction, we wake up, so we almost are forced to do spot zoning. We're almost forced back into action when we thought this would be resolved. So, we need to have a remote parking plan. We need to be able to say where there are lots that are underutilized, whether they're owned by PHA or whether we can get agreements with universities or hospitals that have off-hour parking. We have to create off-site remote parking for people with almost a Uber transportation on-call system, so that a nurse that gets off at the night shift at 3 in the morning doesn't circle the block, wind up parking a quarter of a mile away and walking in the dark. We are almost the unwitting, unintended consequences of our own success. And so, a couple of questions. Number one, I echo the point that we need to have that remote parking plan. It's not my job to tell you where to get it from or what grant to go after, but we need it. Whether it's Kenyatta's district, whether it's Blackwell's district, whether it's Clark's district, whether it's my district, those districts that are experiencing this unprecedented rebirth need to be planned in a way that it makes sense. Transit-oriented development, but everybody is not going to catch the bus, and we need to have a remote parking plan. That's number one. Number two, these questions I need to know. What is the average home price in Philadelphia? What is the average rental unit in Philadelphia? And what do you consider affordable?
Right. So unfortunately, I don't have the exact information about what the average home price is or what the average rental is. We will get that. But what we consider affordable, what we do know is that we have about a quarter of our, 250,000 of our households that are paying more than 30% of their income towards rent, and that's a problem. And that about half of those actually pay more than 50%, and that's a problem. So what we consider affordable would be that people are paying no more than 30% of their income towards housing. So if we take, I think the median income for a family of 4 is $64,000. We take 30% of that, that's what they should be paying in their housing. I'm sorry, I can't do, okay, the median sales price, the median sales price is about $142,000. But we know that we have a huge portion of we have a 26% poverty rate. We know that 40% of those folks make $10,000 or less. So this isn't necessarily that we need to figure out one solution, right? We need to figure out a lot of solutions, and part of the problem is we are getting, our federal dollars have been cut systemically over the years. Now we're looking at all those dollars to go away. Honestly, without government dollars, we can't treat the people that make $10,000 a year or less.
So we can't count on help from up high. So we know that. So we have to think outside the box.
Exactly.
To figure out our own salvation.
Yes.
I'm going to leave middle neighborhoods to my colleague Parker. I know she's going to talk about that. But I want to talk about those two opposite ends of the spectrum and say to you that President Clark, forward thinking a couple of years ago, identified 3,000 properties for workforce housing. 3,000. 300 of them were in my district. What is our plan to develop them in a way that $140,000 worth of house, based on a 26% poverty, where will these people go? If they left Kenyatta's district and they've left Clark's district and they're leaving Janie's district, where are they going, and how do we maintain that workforce housing? And if they're going to the counties, that's a problem. So we have to develop a strategy that doesn't gentrify the entire city, and it's up to you to help working with us to think our way out of this. If our last and greatest hope, like in Star Wars, is George Bush, we're in trouble. So we have to look what we have to make what is necessary. The receivership, what was that program? It was conservatorship for those 3,000 properties. Has anybody thought that process through?
So I think we've looked at that process. I believe after the hearing last year, we shared some information that there's been issues with trying to scale that process up. We continue to look at it and see if we can use it as a more useful tool. I think with the workforce housing piece, we've been rolling that out, but quite honestly, that program only works in certain markets. If we're going to sell a house that comes with our encumbrances, which is an initial 10-year affordability period with overall a 30-year affordability period, and that house costs more than what somebody can buy off the market without any of our encumbrances, chances are someone's not going to be buying our house for more money with more encumbrances. So we've refined where we think the existing workforce housing program can work. That doesn't mean that we're stopping. We continue to look at what all those other properties are, and we are literally looking for best practices across the country to figure out how we address these issues. The reality that we're sitting in is that over the last several decades, we were a city in decline, and we got pretty good at managing that, and now we're a growing city, and we're experiencing growing pains and change, and frankly, we're not so good at that. We're not so good at figuring out how to manage the growth, so that's something that we're working on, and we're trying to get, look to other cities that have experienced similar growing issues and trying to figure out how we get ahead of the curve, as opposed to, our cities such as Austin and San Francisco and New York, we see where they really are not becoming a tale of two cities, but becoming a tale of one city, where if you don't have a certain income, you can't be there. And I think what we have to do a better job and come together as whether you're the administration, whether you're the advocates, whether you're city council, is unite around this issue about affordable housing. It's not, because this isn't, it's very much a Philadelphia issue, and we care first and foremost about Philadelphia, but this is really a national issue. You go to any city and go to their website or what the agenda they're pushing forward, it's all about affordable housing. When we do our district plans, what we hear in every district, the biggest issue is affordable housing. When you go to Politico's website that everybody's looking at as the national issues, housing isn't even listed as an issue, right? Whether you are supportive of this, the federal administration, Mr. Carson, or not, the head of HUD is not even a cabinet member anymore. Housing has really fallen off the agenda, and we all need to work together to get it back on, and we need to, you're exactly right. We need to beat the bushes and figure out how we find resources to address it.
So the president laid down the objective of parking for expanding prosperous neighborhoods. We're also saying that if we know the problem, and we agree, and I'm optimistic about what you're doing with dollars for major systems repair, love it, but I have to answer the question of a young couple starting out making $40,000 in a two-headed household that cannot afford a starter home.
Yeah, Councilman.
And we have to answer that question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Councilman. I should throw this bombshell out here on how you can get more affordable housing. Adjust the 10-year tax abatement, but I'm sorry. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. Let me just start by thank you for including in your testimony an issue that is finally getting some attention, and that is this issue that's been newly defined as middle neighborhoods. But I want to say, we in council, this council had proactively already worked on a tool to support those communities via the president's 1% increase in the realty transfer tax. And thank you for sort of outlining how those dollars in terms of the bonds will be spent and when they'll be going to market. However, yesterday, Councilman Taubenberger, Blackwell, Squilla, myself, we were at the unveiling the snapshot of Pew's 2017 State of the City. And when we looked at a synopsis of the data, it affirmed for us what we knew. There is a significantly high rate of home ownership in these neighborhoods called middle neighborhoods. And we'll hear from Revenue when they come that it is one of the most reliable residential tax bases in the city of Philadelphia, and has been before we've seen the sexy growth take place in other regions. This has been the individual homeowners that have helped to keep Philadelphia solid, but they've often been left out of the mix because they make a nickel over the income guidelines to be eligible for many of the programs that the city offers. So with that being said, and we will have a hearing coming very soon in council on these areas, but for the record and for the benefit of the public who are watching, those Longcrest, West Oak Lane, Councilman Jones, I think you said Overbrook, Burholm, Mayfair. Tell us the overall strategy, because I think what I heard from you was obviously the home repair program, but you also mentioned mortgage foreclosure prevention, and then you mentioned the reinvestment fund study, because along with that high rate of home ownership in those regions, the snapshots of TRF's data says that there's also a high rate of reverse mortgages being issued in those areas. So give us a snapshot, if you will, of the administration's perspective and or overall agenda to addressing these communities that are not in deep poverty, but again, just right over the line.
Right. Well, I think you hit on the sort of the key pieces that we have currently underway or that we're working on in the near future. One is the $40 million bond issue that will be used for loans to folks that, just as you mentioned, are over the income level that would allow them to be able to access the grant program. We believe there is a certain percentage of those homeowners that are going to be eligible to take out those loans. We're still working with you to figure out how to make that program as successful as we can. That would probably not take the form of the city issuing a direct loan to a homeowner. So we're working with some banks or some intermediaries to figure out how we structure that so that it will have the most benefit. But it will also then allow those homeowners to address issues that may not have been covered by some of our other repair programs that folks, particularly in your district, that are experiencing. And I know this comes up in Councilwoman Bass's district too, about retaining walls and shared driveways and those kinds of things.
That was next,
right?
But go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we're trying to figure out a program that deals with as much of that as possible. In reference to, the mortgage prevention piece, like we said, it's been a national model. As always, I wish we had more resources available for all of the things that we do. We think it's been very successful. Other places are trying to replicate it and mimic it, and we will continue to do that work. And then, what we've talked about with the reverse mortgages, although there have been some substantial changes to that program, we still realize there's issues. And in particular, we want to work with not just the data that TRF comes up with, but also through our housing counseling agencies and our NACs to make sure that if someone signs on, particularly to seniors, which can be susceptible to this, that they understand really what they're signing on for, that they still have to pay taxes and those kinds of things, because we're seeing, mortgage companies come in and foreclose because folks didn't realize they had to pay taxes.
With that being said, you're leading me to my next question, and that is, in September of last year, we worked closely with the Senior Law Center, Philadelphia Legal Assistance, and CLS, and they received funding to assist seniors who have been impacted, specifically relative to what you just described regarding reverse mortgages. However, I just learned that in January of 17, did those funds run out in January of 17? And because we know, particularly as it relates to those who are living in those middle neighborhoods, because there's a high rate of home ownership, that means there's a high rate of equity, right? And because of that, that's why they are the choice community for those marketing the reverse mortgages. But, any tools, funding, in place where we can continue that program, or were all of the dollars exhausted in January? And if so, do we intend on making a reinvestment in that area?
Can you answer that?
We continue.
Say your name and who you are.
For the record, I'm Fred Purnell, Division Director of Housing. We continue to try to identify funding sources for that program. I believe, and I do have Melissa Long of my staff here, that those funds are not continued in the year 42, in the year 43 budget, I do not believe. But we're working to identify a funding source to try and bring those programs, to keep those programs alive.
So listen, I thank you so very much for that response. I want to say to you all, for the record, along with my colleagues, Mr. President, I want to work really hard to see how we can find a way to get some dollars back into that line item, because when we talk about the concept of middle neighborhoods, those seniors that are targeted are in some of those same areas that we mentioned, and we don't want them to get left out of the mix when we have this conversation about those who are in deep poverty and those who are right over the line. Because to me, it's a false narrative. It's like we have a scarce amount of resources, and you have those who are considered to be the have-nots competing against those who are just have a little bit more, right? Not even just the have. So I want to work very closely with you along with my colleagues to address that issue. Thank you, Mr. President, for your patience.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very quickly, not to berate the same point, I just want to second Council President Clark's issue on the parking. I think it's a difference between ideal and reality. I mean, ideally, we'd all like to see more people take public transportation. I'm a big advocate of that. But the reality is people come with their cars, and a lot of people that come in these neighborhoods are from the suburbs. They've been driving a car since they were 16 years old. They're going to have a car, So I think we have to realize, and they have to put the car somewhere. The other point issue I wanted to bring up, though, you talked about help for tenants, in your testimony, and you've touched on it a little bit. Could you go into a little bit more of what your, maybe I'll use the word ideal plan is, if you can do it?
Look, my ideal plan is somebody drops a bomb with $400 million. And,
okay. All right.
But I think we
realistically
have to look,
ideal plan. How about that?
I think we are, we don't have my honest answer to that is we don't have an ideal plan formulated yet, but we are looking at how we can do something similar to what we do with mortgage foreclosure prevention with renters, and so that they will have legal representation when they go to eviction court.
Okay.
However, with so much of this, it's identifying the resources to put
Right.
into that. So we're trying to figure out if we can identify resources
Find some money.
yeah, that should go to that,
Yeah.
because we realize that it's an issue, and I think we realize also that, similar to what we're trying to do around home ownership, we need to do a lot of those programs with rental properties, because our best method to prevent homelessness is to keep people in the homes they already have.
Sure. Is there any money in the budget right now dealing with that, with the tenant help issue you're talking about, or is that something you're looking down the road to try to find some?
We're trying to figure out if there's a way that we can provide some dollars for it through the consolidated plan in fiscal year 18, but we haven't been able to definitely identify those dollars as of yet.
By the way, your term of President Trump's skinny budget, that's a nice term. I could think of a few others, but that's all right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So, have you considered approaching the parking authority to do a study, since that's the business they're in?
We certainly could reach out to them. We could reach out to them and see if they would be willing to participate. I'm sure anything that potentially could add to their coffers would be something that they'd be interested in discussing with us. But I'm not necessarily sure that what we're talking about that would address the issues is paid street parking or their lots, but yeah, it's definitely something we can have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth the ask, not to select
Yes,
yourself
always
out
worthwhile to ask the question.
of the conversation. Can you give us an update on the workforce housing initiative? How is it working? Is it working as intended? What are the challenges?
Right. So I think it's working. We are in the process of trying to get it to scale it up. I think we when we first got here, there had been a couple RFPs put on the street that were not working as well as we had hoped that they would work. So we kind of pulled everything back to do an assessment of where the program would work. I think, as I mentioned to when Councilman Johnson asked his question, the big issue is that program only works in certain communities.
Right.
Right, where there has to be a relatively substantial difference between what is the market price that things are selling at and what we're going to sell, or the developers that are working with us, what they're going to sell something at, because we come with additional encumbrances. So, for example, if properties in the neighborhood are selling on the open market for $150,000, and we come in and say, okay, you have to buy our house is $150,000, but you have to sign all these deed restrictions and all this other paperwork, chances are someone's going to choose to buy the house that's $150,000 that does not come with any of those encumbrances. And what we've realized is there probably has to be a gap of at least about $50,000 between what we are going to sell our house and what the market is. So that would mean that if we were going to sell our house for $150,000, the median sales price in that neighborhood would have to be $200,000. Now, the other sort of factor in this is that the only subsidy, if you will, that we're putting into the program is we're selling the land for $1. So the sales price also has to be adequate to cover the cost of development and construction and return, at least enough of a profit to a private developer that they'd be interested in pursuing the program.
Thank you. Mr. Purnell, I know you're on the front line of that enterprise initiative idea, vision. Coupled with what our secretary has already said, what would you add?
Well, we also, as a city, we recognize that our construction costs are relatively high. So one of the things that we're challenged with doing is assembling enough of these parcels so that a developer could, by scale, not make as much on each individual house, but be able to aggregate the development costs across a bunch of parcels to make it advantageous to actually build the project. It is very similar cost to buy a 2x4 to build in a high income area as it is in a lower income area.
Right, and
So
I
that's the-
think the other key thing is right now, we don't have a lot of properties in markets where the median sales price is high enough for us to do a lot of this type of work, but that is something hopefully we will be able to resolve by getting the land bank fully operational, that we'll be able to bring more of the vacancy in stronger market areas in and get those properties back into being tax-producing properties.
So, coupled with being in Councilman Johnson's area, and I believe Councilman President Clark, is there anything in the pipeline, and this is probably more appropriate to ask Councilwoman Blackwell, for the Mantua section of the city?
We have been working with Councilwoman Blackwell on a few RFPs for properties that have been listed in her area, or we have also, she had identified prior to the new disposition policies coming in place that there were certain developers that she wanted to do direct sales to for workforce housing.
Okay.
So yes,
Then
there's
lastly,
some of
before
that
the
going
bell
on.
rings, I know when President Clark conceived this, it was partially designed for those who simply can't afford a $300,000 piece of dirt, is what my mother would call it. So are developers honoring the vision to ensure that income bracket that is intended for is indeed getting and being promoted to that income bracket?
Right, that's a requirement for participating in the program. So the
Okay.
maximum sales price right now is capped at $230,000. We
You said
encourage.
that's the maximum?
Yes, we encourage a mix of sales prices. Some of that's influenced by the mix and the size of the units. So some projects are able to kind of have a range of prices across that. But to be honest with you, most of these developers are coming in at the higher range because, again, you know, it costs a certain amount of money to do business here.
I see. I'm surprised it hasn't rung, so I'm going to throw one other one in here. I'm thankful that my staff pulled an article that talks about how well our city has been doing with regards to mortgage foreclosures. And so what Plan B are you thinking about? Should the threat from the feds indeed become real? What's your Plan B for keeping Philadelphia in front of the pack when it comes to helping families avoid foreclosure?
Right. So we have been, when we put together the consolidated plan budget for this year, we put it together with our fingers and toes and our eyes crossed that we would at least have level funding. We believe that will happen. Just to inform folks that if something changes in the federal budget that goes into effect October 1 of 2017, that does not affect our housing budget until July 1 of 2018.
I see.
Okay, so we believe that we will, in the continuing resolution piece, which we will have more information about at the end of this month, we believe that we will be able to maintain our level funding for at least another year. However, that being said, while we were going through that, we did put together kind of a budget that showed what would happen if we took a 15% cut in our things. And what we tried to really maintain as much as we could those key programs, you know, the home repair piece, homeless prevention, some rental production, and I believe we, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe we did as much as we could to try to maintain things like the mortgage diversion program because
Okay.
it's been so successful for us.
Very well.
But, you know, again, to put this into perspective, in 2002, we got $89 million in the various federal funds. This year, we got $47 million. If we adjusted those $2,002 for inflation, we should have gotten $122 million this year. So really, we are looking at, we have about a third of the dollars that we once had. And yes, that has a huge impact on what we're seeing in the city, particularly this issue of tale for two cities, right? I mean, the private market has come up and we want that growth and we want that to happen, but at the same time, the dollars of our supposedly national social safety net have been going away, and they've been going away for years. I think we're seeing what we believe is a very stark sort of pull the rug out from under you, but the reality is that net has been shrinking for a number of years. And so one of the things that came up in the charter change, which turns out to be a lot of foresight here, is something called the Housing Advisory Board, where it's the head of all the housing agencies, but in addition we have the banking industry, we have a member of the advocates community, we have CDC, private development, the real estate industry, all represented, council, to try to, basically it's a think tank to say, we've got to figure out how to address this issue because one, the feds are probably not going to be there. The local government, we're doing a lot, but we need to figure out how we can do more. And we need to figure out how the private community, private dollars and philanthropic dollars come in. As we mentioned before, affordable housing is the #1 issue across the board, and we really need a comprehensive plan to address it. And unfortunately, we really don't have it right now.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning, Ms. Fadulin. My questions somewhat follow up in reference to some of the concerns that Councilman Brown raised regarding the challenges in the funding we receive for housing and planning in the city of Philadelphia. And you correctly stated in your testimony that our consolidated plan, and more particularly the community development block grant dollars, have gone down dramatically over the years. Even during the previous administration with President Obama, due to sequestration, we received a lot less dollars than we've had in the past. I noticed that in your testimony you made reference to, and as Councilman Greenlee said, the skinny budget. What steps do we anticipate going forward if the federal government reduces the CDB dollars even more and we have even less consolidated plan dollars? Considering some of the additional revenue we received from commercial properties, are there any thoughts regarding those dollars? I know Mr. DeBoe talked about using that as a reserve for the city based on some of the issues and concerns that may happen in D.C. and with the new administration. But have there been any discussions on how those dollars may be allocated, especially to programs like the mortgage foreclosure diversion program and other programs that are funded primarily through community development block grant dollars?
Right. So, as I reference when I try to answer what Councilwoman Brown says, I mean, we don't have anything before us so far that shows what whether they will definitely be specific federal cuts. That being said, we did prepare for a potential 15% cut. I think we're heartened by what we hear at the national level as far as bipartisan support for the community development block grant program. But again, that being said, we realize that over a number of years, housing resources continue to get cut. So I think it's interesting. In a lot of other cities, what they're encountering is that one of the reasons why they feel like they have an affordable housing issue is because they don't allow a lot of multifamily zoning. We don't have that issue here. What we have is we have a kind of a multifold issue that in some respects is somewhat unique to Philadelphia, although is similar to our sister cities like Cleveland or Baltimore or something like that, where we have a predominantly row house stock. Over 71% of our units are over 55 years old, and we have a 26% poverty rate. So we have very old housing. I mean, row house stock in and of itself is not a bad type of unit for affordable housing, but when it's that old and you don't have much income, it's very hard to maintain your home. And so I think when I looked at, for example, infrastructure, there was a time when a huge percentage of our infrastructure was funded with federal dollars, and now that's flipped. 65% of our infrastructure is funded with local dollars. And given where the federal government is going, we're probably going to have to try to figure out a mechanism to kind of flip that switch as well with housing. Again, that being said, That doesn't mean that the school issues go away, or that public safety goes away, or the pension issues go away. So how we balance that all within our local budget means we're going to have to identify mechanisms for additional resources. The mechanisms that are available, that again, oftentimes are not politically palatable, are you raise taxes or you raise user fees. And I think we're going to have to figure out how we approach those topics in a way that makes economic sense for our city, but realizes that if we don't address affordable housing as an issue, that doesn't make much economic sense for our city either.
I'm glad you raised the issues of affordable housing and also working in collaborative fashion. And you mentioned earlier in testimony that you submit a unified plan with Philadelphia Housing Authority. Have there been ongoing conversation of other ways of collaboration, especially considering some of the financial impacts we may have from DC?
Yes, we have so I speak regularly with Kelvin. I have with Mr. Jeremiah, who's the head of the Housing Authority. I have a regular monthly meeting with him to coordinate. We also have a coordination meeting with the Office of Supportive Housing, Department of Behavioral Health, and Community Economic Empowerment Office. And we have invited Philadelphia Housing Authority to sit in those meetings with us as well to figure out the housing resources that come into the city from the government, how we better coordinate those. In addition, the Philadelphia Housing Authority has a seat at the table for the Housing Advisory Board that I mentioned. And frankly, Kelvin and I just pick up the phone often and talk to each other, plus Fred Purnell also sits on the Housing Authority Board. So I think we are moving in a way probably to have more cooperation between the administration and the Housing Authority than we have in the past. And we're consistently looking for ways for our staffs to be supportive of each other. We hope to play a larger role in what's going on in the Sharswood community. We're working together on the Choice Neighborhood Initiative in Eastern North Philadelphia. And, we have I think we are very much looking at how we can coordinate our resources, particularly where it comes to the preservation of projects that are about to come out of their compliance period.
Okay. I have some additional questions. I'll just ask this one last quick question. What's the current outstanding balance of our Section 8, under the Section 108 loan program?
Councilman, could you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Outstanding balance under the Section 108 program.
It's paid off.
It's paid off.
It's paid off.
So at the end of year 42, which is the current year we're in, that will be paid off in full.
All right, because I noticed there's about $1 million coming in the loan payment, so.
Correct.
And so if there was an opportunity to borrow under Section 108, what would be the amount to do that?
So I think so to be honest with you, that is something we'd want to look very closely at. I don't think we want to get ourselves in the situation that we got in the past.
I'm not saying.
Because Section 108 loans are supposed to be given out to projects that can actually pay them back. So yes. I think we are interested in looking at that, but we're going to be very conservative in our underwriting of that.
Yes, not so much the marathon grills. Sir. I'm sorry.
That's Carl.
I'll come back with more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Keona Sanchez. Councilwoman.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. I want to kind of go back to President Clark's point. I can't even begin to express how important it is that this division under your portfolio work in a very coordinated way. And I know there's been lots of efforts from, how do we maximize, all of the resources. I can't tell you how important it is. And I want to bring to the attention of my colleagues, I have a new part of my district, the 62nd Ward, and we were putting together data sets when Councilwoman Parker started talking about neighborhoods. And on Friday, we went and toured the area. And one of the data sets that I found the most interesting was that 44% of the people in the 62nd Ward had a delinquent water bill, right? Now, clearly, I have an interest in that because we're going to be the city with the most progressive water legislation in the country. But for me, it was startling because it is it is one thing, and we're always going to need additional resources, and we're going to have those competing interests, but we have some tools in our own toolbox that I don't think we always maximize. And I agree with you, the best housing strategy is keeping people in their homes. But that is why it is important that the Department of Community Development set community development policy and not our finance and revenue arm. And when we're fighting with the administration for forgiveness around penalties and interest for poor people, we always get this pushback, and yet we're saying we need additional money for these things when we're creating part of the problem. If we recognize and we value our home ownership rate, if we recognize and value the working poor, then it is incumbent on us to use the toolboxes we have. And I know some of this is not under your purview, but it should be, because it should inform what our collection strategies are. And I want you to kind of put on the record, and I know we've been working really hard around this agreement about how we're going to acquire properties, but it is still, to me, difficult to understand how the Revenue Department wants us to pay for delinquent properties when they get pennies on the dollar at the sheriff's sale. That is irreconcilable to me, that you want me to pay $5,000–$6,000 to the Revenue Department, so I have to sit here and fight for dollars for your department so that you can pay the Revenue Department when they get pennies at sheriff's sale. And I'm not asking you to respond to that because you're in a tight boat, but this council needs to know that those are the policy decisions that we're making in this administration that go counter to what we're all here for. I mean, we're all preaching to the choir here around the needs and the competing interests of the needs that are out here. And I'm going to publicly again state what I've stated. You know, this has been a 10-year journey for some people in this room, a 30-year journey around fairness. And we cannot have a city that does, through its regulatory procedures, fuel people losing their houses. We should not be sitting here thinking about the millions of dollars we should give for people to stay in the home that they own when the only people they owe is us. We're the problem. And how we calculate interest, how we calculate penalties. And we see that now with, you know, and I want to go to the point around, one, the mayor has to readdress this policy. We cannot struggle to put money in there to acquire these properties. We have a robust community economic development constituency here, ready to do housing preservation like we need it done, and we need to give them the tools to do it. And the land bank was supposed to be a toolbox, and we're never going to maximize this utilization if we don't change our policy. So that's my elevator speech. But now I want to go back to policies, because we are in consideration to do more tax liens. And without really addressing the issue of our previous lien sales, which in districts like mine, I have 1,357 properties encumbered on a lien sale. And so to me is, how is the planning division influencing how we move forward with any lien sales that would add to what is a bunch of encumbered properties all over the city?
Right, and I will be honest that we haven't been very involved in those discussions. When we are involved in discussions, we point out that exact issue, is that there are things that we wish that we were able to accomplish in certain districts that even have a larger issue than the 7th district when it comes to encumbered lien sale properties. And when we are in those conversations, we push to say that, you know, what kind of assurance are we going to get that if there's an additional lien sale that we're not going to find ourselves in the same situation that we're in today? And we believe that that is a very real and a very valid concern.
Are we going to work with our vendors and partners to put a handle on these properties that are encumbered, so that at least with the 6,000 properties, there is some sort of plan? We all know we can't pull $18 million from the sky to try to acquire these properties back, but at least is there a commitment to put our hands around it, so that if this council has to make a decision on future sales, that we do it in an informed way.
Right, and I believe that revenue is looking at those issues. I will work with them to get more information on that.
That's why we have a community development and planning arm, and they need to influence policies. I can't have bureaucrats at the revenue department whose goal is to raise money, setting community development policy for my district, because I'm working at cross purposes. Thank you, Council President.
Councilwoman, I agree with you 1,000%. What's the term? Wag the dog, the tail wagging the dog? I see too often.
I got some better terms in Spanish.
Yeah, we talk about, I don't know what it is, something about a dog and a tail. But, we set these policies, but then you could take one department and just kind of go off on a tangent and actually, I'm going to, on the 24th, when we have our more extensive hearing, this issue about foreclosures, and actually mortgage foreclosures, I see you have a program to work on that, but the most significant foreclosures are being done by guess who? City of Philadelphia, right? So it's inconsistencies in all of the various ways that we operate, but yet revenue can dictate the terms on how we ultimately implement these different programs, or they stop us implementing programs in the case of the land bank. So, and again, you just happen to be the one sitting at the table. You're not responsible. But that's how we do, Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilwoman?
Sure.
You know what? You're next, Councilwoman. No way in the world I'm forgetting you. You're next. Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilman.
Get me in the
You
middle
know when the
of it.
Councilwoman calls, I listen.
No problem with the Councilwoman from the 3rd Ward. Thank all of you for being here.
Got you in trouble there.
So I just want to thank you for your testimony and really framing the affordable housing conversation from a national perspective and how it should be one of our high priorities here in the city of Philadelphia. And I know for FY2018, our focus is on 350 units of affordable housing and also 7,400 homes that will have an opportunity to participate in the basic system repairs program, which I think is great because in my district, which is currently changing, development is great, but also I'm always advocating for that balance. Grew up in Point Breeze, still live in Point Breeze, and trying to find different ways to keep people remaining in Point Breeze, but also welcome individuals who want to move into the neighborhood, regardless of if they're low income, regardless if they're looking for affordable housing or workforce housing. And so I always want to advocate for not just workforce housing, not affordable housing, but the low income community, because that's a population that I talk to in my community that will have a tough time paying $150,000, $160,000 for a home. And so I want to make sure that they stay on the agenda. And so we know over the past couple years, our federal funding has been significantly reduced. And so I just want to encourage the administration to make sure that those who represent us in Congress play a major role in bringing back home the resources for this particular issue, which is affordable workforce housing. Regardless of what administration is in power, I do believe that those who represent us, if they make it a priority, the same way that they will negotiate for an infrastructure bill for SEPTA, they can negotiate and bring home support for affordable and workforce housing. When we talk about different ways of means to support your mission in city government, particularly the city of Philadelphia, obviously there's various proposals that are here on the table. Obviously, I think the advocates are here today supporting a impact fee on developers, which will allow a certain portion of the abatement return that we will receive to support the Housing Trust Fund. So one, I want to know your perspective on one, do you support such an initiative? And then two, how will that initiative, that proposal, if moved forward through council passes, the revenue from it will support your workforce housing and development strategy, but most importantly, with the funding, how do you prioritize what neighborhoods receive that funding for affordable and workforce housing? I'm a freshman, I'm trying to catch up with my with Council President Clark, I'm trying to catch up with the Blackwell Homes. I think they're about to have a new community center and a couple other things. And so just in lowly, little South Philadelphia, we want to look at, as you're helping me now, do some RFPs, but how do we strategize and build it out? So one, would you support such an initiative? Two, how will such an initiative help further workforce, affordable, and low-income housing throughout the city of Philadelphia? And how do you prioritize what neighborhoods will actually receive the support that's needed based upon that type of funding?
Right. So it's too bad you weren't here for the Hope 6 funding when that was available. So to answer your first question about the impact fee, I think it's something that we should probably take a close look at and figure out. I do probably believe that there's probably a sweet spot there where some type of fee would not necessarily tilt the scales against market rate development, and that we'd see that the benefit from the affordable housing development would potentially outweigh what the market may take a hit on. And I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to look at, because I think it's clear that we are in a situation where the public can't do it on its own, and we need to go after some other kind of dollars. In reference to if we were able to get additional resources into the city, it's my understanding that something like that, the dollars are potentially earmarked to go into the Housing Trust Fund. There is an executive order that dictates how those Housing Trust Fund dollars are spent. I believe it's 50% of those funds have to go to somebody making 30% of median or below. Right now, that goes to a variety of things, how those dollars would be spent would be in accordance with that executive order. I mentioned that we're about to come out with an RFP that will coincides with the next tax credit round with the Philadelphia Housing Finance Group, and we are looking to provide extra points in that RFP to get affordable housing in stronger market areas. We try to do our best to provide equal opportunity across the city for that, but I have to be frank and say that we are going to take a closer look at what we believe has a high chance of success of getting funded at the state level. Because I think in the past we have left too much state dollars on the table, because sometimes we have funded things that do not have the potential to get funded at the state, and we miss it. And we can't look at in the environment that we've just spent. I don't know how long talking about. We cannot afford to leave any dollars on the table.
Oh, that's right. Mr. Chair, can I add one last small question, if that's all right with you? A little latitude. And just one last part of my question. Out of the 7,400 homes that will be repaired through the Basic Systems Repair Program, can you give me an overview of the minority participation in terms of contractors and subcontractors that will have an opportunity to participate?
As a matter of fact, I can. If you just give me a minute and get to that page. I was provided with a lot of backup information. Okay, so under the LIHEAP program, which is about providing support for utility bills, we have 33% of that work goes to certified MBEs. Another 17% goes to uncertified WBEs. So we are split about 50-50 there. About 50% is minority contractors and about 50% is majority. As far as our weatherization program, 90% of our participants there are certified MBE. And then with basic system repair, we're at 56% WBE, MBE, and under the adaptive mod, 27%. So we actually believe that this is, although not all the subcontractors that work are certified, so we want to we're working with the EOE office about, or OEO with, about kind of a pipeline program. How do we get those folks in, get them, and try to lead them to the path of certification? We believe this is one of the most robust mechanisms we have in the city to support small and minority contractors in providing them work. We work in close cooperation with the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation around providing them lines of credit, and we hope to work with their 10,000 small businesses program to build the capacity so that they can take on larger contracts and even move on to contracts that aren't necessarily government work.
Just want to commend you and your team for your efforts, because obviously if we're going to float a bond to finance this work, which is taxpayers' dollars, I think it's great that it seems like you guys have a model for minority and people of color participation in this process, and so I just want to thank y'all for your effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Council in general, if I may, tomorrow at 9 a.m. at 1234 Market Street, we're actually holding our RFP proposal meeting for the expanded BSRP program. Representatives from PIDC are going to be there. And one of the things that we're working with is to try to increase their capacity and access to capital. So tomorrow at 9, 1234 Market, hopefully it'll be standing room only.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you very much. When I came in, I heard the president speaking about parking. I thought of our session last week where we had Councilman O and Councilman Squilla talking about these these EV vehicles, and I thought about all the big problems we're having with parking across the board. I mean, for Market Street, Chestnut Street, and Walnut Street, they keep just wanting to take out lanes. They want to take out more of a lane on Chestnut Street now. They're talking about a meeting to go from 34th to 45th, and they continue want to take lanes out. They continue to want to deal with, the Bicycle Coalition. I don't even know how they managed to do some. They took Baltimore Avenue in my district. They put parking there, and they took a lane out. I mean, my point is that we keep losing. We lose traffic. We lose places people can park, and yet we need to have laws that really require, when you do all this building, you got to allow for people to park, and it doesn't happen. When I had a meeting to deal with everything from 29th Street to 46th Street in my district about 6 months ago, and we mentioned certain issues, parking being one of them, people had not considered one another. So the big developers considered their own development projects, but they did not consider the next guy who's coming, but only what they're doing. That is why I introduced this bill to change the law with regard to parking instead of making it, I don't know, however many, 3 for 10 or to raise it. But I don't really know it. I thought it would create discussion, but it only created questions for me. What was I trying to do? Was I going to push that? But I'm saying, as we deal with housing, we need to change the law to deal with parking. It is impossible. Everybody knows it, but we're not doing something to require adequate parking. We're not making these developers do it, and we need to do that, and we need to, and it will help in a lot of areas, from, as I said, from the bicycles to EV to everything that we're dealing with could be better if we decide how we're going to do parking, and if we're not piecemealed into dealing with it, where people come out and all of a sudden you find issues that are done, and sometimes, as I said, when they consider this parking, they don't always come to the council people as they should. It's a big thing. It's a problem in my district where I have so much development. We still don't have this stuff done, and we will have to, as a city, look at it. We're the city for development, but we're still not adequately dealing with parking, and certainly I'm willing to work with you in that regard in my district, because the developers, they're not worried about that. They're worried about their next condo. And we really need to deal with it as an issue and change the law, I would think, because since we have it by law, it's not easy.
Right.
But whether we put it in the zoning code saying if you build this, but we are not doing that properly now, and it's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, I think we hear you loud and clear that we need to take a focus and look at parking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
I had a couple of questions, and I wanted to first start by just remarking on a number of the questions that I've been hearing here today about what's the plan. You know, when we think about what we all pretty much assume is coming down the pike in terms of cuts from the federal government, and you had mentioned earlier how we left some state dollars on the table in the past, and we haven't, fully accessed all of the resources that have been available to us. I guess one of the things that I'm not hearing, and that concerns me a little bit, is that there doesn't seem to be a plan in place to deal with these things. And I know that you are in planning mode, but I just think that we should have something in place as we prepare for what we know is coming.
And I think you're accurate. We don't have, we are in the process of looking at best practices and trying to identify a plan in place. But it's difficult to put a plan in place that replaces $50 million.
Certainly.
Yeah, so I think we're looking at that and we're trying to figure out what would actually work here.
Right.
Like I said, there's some things about Philadelphia that makes us unique. So we can't sort of take an off-the-shelf product, if you will.
Sure.
We have to do, we have to maneuver it a little bit, and then I think as you guys are probably more aware than anybody else, every time we try to do a one-size-fits-all fix.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think, those are things we're looking at. Like I said, we did take a look at what would happen if we took a 15% hit, but we are very much in planning mode and programmatic mode to say, okay, we maybe have about 15 months.
I appreciate that you're looking at what would happen if we take a $50 million cut. What do we lose? What goes away? What is changed, altered, whatever? But I think the other component to that that's missing is what can we do? What is the action?
Yes,
that
and I agree
will
with
come
you.
with that? Yeah.
I agree with you 100%, and that's exactly what we're looking at now. Is what can we do? How can we figure out how to replace some of that revenue, or
Right.
how can we look at different sources other than the government for that revenue?
Okay, and so then you are working towards developing a strategic plan, knowing that it's not, and I certainly understand, it's not quick, it's not easy to figure out, what do you do if you take away $50 million? Because
Right.
if it was easy, you already would have a plan in place.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but you are actively working on one. And so is there any idea in terms of when you would see a plan, or when we could see a plan from out of planning and development?
I think we hope to have something informal, something that we can provide by the end of this calendar year.
By the end of this calendar year, okay. Okay. Any sooner, possibly?
If we come up with any brilliant ideas before that, we will definitely let you
Okay.
know.
No, I certainly understand. This is not easy, this is a challenge, but I do not want to assume that, that we're sort of just sitting and waiting. So I think it's important not only that we're doing the planning, but that we're also letting folks know, whether it's city council or our constituents, letting folks know that we are planning for whatever may come.
Yeah, well, I think the reality is if we take zero cuts, we still need to figure out how to find some additional resources. And so that's definitely what we are looking at is regardless of whether we get cuts or not, we need to identify a way to get more dollars.
I agree. Maybe we should follow Sherry's lead, construction impact tax. I don't know. But I assume that you're talking to many different sources to try to come up with a remedy.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to go back to one other quick question. Sir, could you go back to that session you mentioned tomorrow that's going to be happening? I didn't get the details of that. Can you discuss that a little bit further?
Okay. Again, I'm Fred Purnell, Division Director of Housing and Community Development. In response to the dollars that were allocated under the bond issuance for the expanded BSRP program, we've basically ramped up our efforts to get more minority, female, disadvantaged businesses involved. We've done several things, but tomorrow at 9 a.m., we have an RFP on the street now for all the different services that we provide, and tomorrow is the pre-proposal meeting with the interested contractors and some of the contractors who are already working with us. Included in that session is access to folks at PIDC who actually provide lines of credit and some business enhancement for the small contractors. So they're going to be part of that meeting. The hope is to get an additional bevy of contractors so we can burn through this money, not burn through it in a non-productive way. But we do have a significant backlog, and one of the things we have to do is get more contractors participating and dedicating their services to us. One of the problems that we discovered is that sometimes our contracts aren't large enough that a firm can actually dedicate a crew to us. So we're looking at expanding our ability to expand their capacity so we can have more people to work with.
So including some smaller contractors, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Or just contractors that would have the ability to take on smaller jobs?
Most of our basic system contractors are small.
Okay.
And again, it's not the big, multi-million-dollar developer that's doing this. It's the contractor that does this for a living, the roofer, the electrician, who depends on our work to survive. We want to enhance that so we can get more out of that contractor and at the same time grow their business, and Commerce is working along with us to help.
Okay, very good. I'll come back around on the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Fred, do you have that on in a flyer form that you can email all council members so that we can get out to our constituency and our neighborhood groups?
Yes, I can. We did do a blast to council a couple days ago, but we'll get something out. I don't know if it's a flyer, but we do have some correspondence that we've been using, and if we don't have it now, Paul Christie is here. We'll have it by the end of the day, I'm sure.
That'd be great, because we'd like to get it out to our local CDCs and, our project users and constituencies, in various forms of communications. This way, we try to encourage, because we hear a lot where, nobody shows up, or, there's lack of engagement and encouragement to get people to get involved. And, we'd like to take some of that initiative ourselves in the process. So thank you, Councilwoman, for...
Is this the only session?
This is the only session specific to the RFP that's on the street now. We hope to have proposals in place by the end of the month. So these folks who are actively participating in the program or interested in the RFP that's on the street.
Great. If you could resend that, that'd be helpful. We do get inundated with a lot of emails, and I just don't want anybody to miss it, especially since it's the only one that's pre RFP, for informational purposes only. I wanted to add to Councilman Johnson's conversation, which is great, Ms. Fadulin, about but I'm glad to hear you're talking about affordable housing, and you're talking about revisiting and taking a look at various ways that we could looking at our fee structures and impact fees, if there's a sweet spot, because I do think that there is a sweet spot, and I think a lot of people in council also feel the same way, and trying to figure out and calculate what that is and how we can accomplish, I think, our shared goals with this body and the administration of the city of Philadelphia. We're trying to ensure that our objectives are being met at a reasonable cost. So I'm glad to hear that. If you could keep us, and my office has been speaking with your office as well as other council members and various groups that are out there in our community. So, to the community and partners that are all here today with the signs. Just keep doing what you're doing and, keeping us informed and engaged. We're going to continue to try to find out where that sweet spot is as we move forward. So I'm glad to hear that. I want to shift the conversation a little bit more regarding to industrial land. And do we have a database for industrial land that is either occupied and or vacant?
Do we have a takeaway?
Eleanor. Eleanor Sharp, the City Planning Commission. A database? I can check on that for you, but I do know that we have some sense of where the industrial lands are and how they're occupied between PIDC, Commerce, and us. We can get that for you.
Okay, so you have an idea. So if you have an idea, do you know who the industrial users are?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we have some sense. Yes,
I think between Commerce and PIDC that
DCNS.
most of that information is available.
Yes.
So what I'm getting to is I think we need to have a better system of and real data, on, what is zoned industrial, what is occupied, what is vacant, and who's occupying it, for our up-to-date industry and manufacturing sector. I mean, it's a little bit dated, so I'm just trying to, while we're investing in a lot of our systems, and especially some of our legacy systems that tie in with revenue, I'd like to, reprioritize that
Sure.
as we move forward and further the conversations throughout this budget process.
I know we definitely have what's zoned industrial, and we do have some who's using it, but that's not always up to date because, land changes, but we can definitely.
I think that's kind of important because they're local jobs. I mean, they're jobs here in the city of
Agreed.
Philadelphia, usually that, maybe industrial zoned, but they're in neighborhoods where people live and where people are looking for jobs, and where,
Absolutely.
we can, it's somewhat of a good mix instead of just a flat out boom in a certain sect. We have, somewhat of a good complement, people can work and live in some of this emerging development that's taking place throughout our city. Do you know what, if any, industrial users have gone into the industrial zone IRMX?
I don't have that number, but I can find that out.
All right. We
IRMX.
we look into that, and we can provide that to the
Yeah.
chair.
So what
And-
percentage of industrial users have actually occupied recently rezoned IRMX? Is that what you're looking for?
Correct. Industrial users that have gone into IRMX status.
Okay.
All right, in zoning. Can you describe the coordination between the departments in response to industrial appeal notices?
Yes, we have a cohort between the Planning Commission, Commerce Department, sometimes PIDC, and other agencies. When appeal appears for the Zoning Board of Adjustments, that there is some conversation about whether or not the administration is supportive of the appeal or not supportive of the appeal. So prior to the hearing at the Zoning Board of Adjustment, there is communication so that we're all on the same page.
So the notifications are going out and also getting to the board when the appeals are taking place?
The Zoning Board, you mean?
Yes. So the interdepartment, as
Right.
you described, that
Does not
notification
include-
that is happening.
That's happening, yes.
That is happening. So that's
Yes.
good. That's good.
That's happening.
I'd like to hear that.
The board hears it, and I do believe we do flag it. The Planning Commission actually sits at the Zoning Board, so we do flag it at the board meeting that this
Okay,
is.
so the board's aware of
Yeah.
the change, and they understand that we're,
Yes.
collectively as an intergovernmental department, and, that there is a land
Correct.
preservation.
Correct.
When it comes to industrial use.
Correct. And in our prior, we've had an opportunity to train the new board since the new administration, and we've indicated that to them, that when the staff does present that this is an industrial appeal in front of you, please make note of it, because whether or not it's an industrial protective area or not. So they are aware of that.
And so the 2035
Yes.
has received a lot of critical acclaim, right? And which is great. And congratulations, for that. I mean, we appreciate, I know as council members, especially district council members, the engagement and outreach that goes out into these plans, and we've been able to work with planning throughout the process and in neighborhoods to ensure that the remapping goes correctly and goes right. But the plans are recommendations. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so neither council or any other city departments are bound to act upon these plans?
Correct.
All right. Do you know of any other municipalities that have similar plans that are non-binding, or are there municipalities that do
Sure.
have some sort of teeth to some of these recommendations or plans? I wouldn't even say recommendations. I'm going to say plan.
Okay. So I will say, though, even though other departments are not bound by them, that we have been been able to work with a lot of our city agencies, water department, streets department, all the various and sundry agencies that recommendations apply to effectuate a lot of the recommendations. In our number of adopted plans, I think more than 50% of our recommendations are on the way or have been implemented, and that's only to the credit of the other agencies who are the implementing agencies. To directly answer your question, there is a uniqueness of home rule charter cities, which is in the state of Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, where the comprehensive plan is not a legally binding document. The rest of the state follows the municipal planning code, where the comprehensive plan sets the land use and the zoning, and then development follows from that. But we have the luxury of being a home rule charter state to choose not to, and it's advisory.
So it's municipal planning code?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And how does that work here, knowing that, in other places? Well, first of all, we're Philadelphia, right?
Right.
So,
we do what we
we're
want.
very Philadelphia. I'm not going to say centric, but Philadelphia is different from other municipalities. But does that? What does that do to your long-term strategy in achieving the plans, all right, that we invest in our communities?
I think we're a different culture here in Philadelphia, and we're not unique to that. Like I said, Pittsburgh, I believe, is also like this. But the difference between how development unfolds here as opposed to another municipality that has to follow the law, I believe the comprehensive plan comes first, and that sets the stage through public engagement, similar to what we do. And it defines areas and their uses, and everybody agrees upon this is how we're going to go. And the zoning code follows that to support those uses. So it streamlines for everyone, including developers and communities. This is how we've planned for our community, and therefore this is how it will unfold. And our laws support this. And therefore I haven't worked in those other municipalities, so I'm sure there are pros and cons, but it's different. So ours is advisory and recommended with no teeth, and theirs is more legally binding.
It's prescriptive.
It's prescriptive. It lays it out up front so there's no confusion, and everybody sort of falls in line and follows suit. And they can make changes to it because nothing's cast in stone, but it's much more prescriptive.
So the legislative or authority
Yes.
has the right to change or
Correct.
adjust
And it is,
accordingly.
I do believe it's accepted by their city councils and their bodies of government. So it's a document that's definitely approved, signed, sealed, and delivered, whereas I think it's only the Planning Commission which adopts it in the city of Philadelphia.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Squill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, guys, and thank you for being so patient with all of us. We appreciate all your work and support you do during these times of very high development in the city of Philadelphia. But going back to the affordable housing, we had added that affordable housing bonus into some developments. And I know there was some people that took advantage of it to actually use the bonus, and other people took advantage of it and then put money into the housing trust fund. Are we actively looking to include these bonuses in future developments? And do we get more units out of a person having the affordable units in the actual project, or I guess, the calculated sum of money that then would go into the housing trust fund, to build the housing trust fund, so that we could then do more projects on our own.
Right. So, a couple things. One is, we are seeing more private developers looking to take advantage of the mixed income section of the code that allows for increased bonus or floor area ratio to be built if you get down to a level of units that are affordable at 80% of median or below. Right now, we are contemplating a change in our code that may allow for even a greater density bonus if you got down to providing units for 60% of median or below. So I think we try to encourage that through our zoning code, looking at the districts where developers can take advantage of those bonuses and making sure that we're offering them in as many districts as we can that we believe that it makes sense that people would be interested in taking that bonus. I don't think we've had enough people yet take advantage of the bonus to really do an analysis of the procedure. And then the question about, do you get more units by building them on site as opposed to putting it into the Housing Trust Fund? That's a little bit apples to oranges, because the Housing Trust Fund doesn't necessarily dictate that that means a new, rental housing unit or a new home ownership unit, as it would if you put it into a new a new development. So I think there's probably, some comparison that could be made and some analysis can be done once we have a larger body of units there. I will tell you that when we're looking at those bonuses and in putting together the affirmatively furthering fair housing plan, I think we are very intentionally looking at mechanisms to provide true mixed income. That if you are taking advantage of the bonus, that you're mixing those units and you're producing the units, that you're mixing those units within where the market rate units are happening, and you're not saying there's a separate building or they're in a different location. But we believe there's benefits to both. We believe there's benefits to putting those units on site within a market rate development, but we also believe there's benefits to putting money into the Housing Trust Fund and letting so much of our affordable housing and CDC community take advantage of those additional dollars to do the important work that they do.
Now, are we looking at using the affordable bonus in all zoning categories?
Well, not in all zoning categories, in any of the higher density ones, right? And for example, in CMX 2, where the height limit is 38 feet, and that's our commercial areas, I don't know that we necessarily want to, those, so zoning districts that have a height limit that come with them usually generally don't, they're not based on floor area ratio, the density, so that's a little bit tricky. And we don't necessarily want in RSA 5 standard townhouse 38-story district to all of a sudden have somebody be able to say, okay, I'm building one affordable housing unit and now I'm going to build a 10-story building. I think, so yes, predominantly in CMX 3 in TOD areas, CMX 4 and CMX 5, we are looking at that bonus is offered, and we're continuing to look at it to make it more and more attractive to the development community. And we're actually looking to tweak it because there's, we're seeing more mixed use projects where someone could conceivably get this bonus where a portion of their project is residential but not a significant portion, so they could get a significant bonus while they're not doing a lot of residential. So we continue to tweak it to make it more advantageous to developers.
Is there any interest in IRMX or no?
We haven't thought about that.
Yeah, I think it's something we'll look at and see. Again, I think we want to be careful because some of our IRMX, as you know, is within residential neighborhoods, and we don't, and there's already issues with building that 55, 60 feet tall. We don't necessarily want to say, okay, now you can build it 100 feet tall.
Some of these are IRMXs and existing structures. I don't know if you could.
Well, and some of them may be structured and have the ability to have some kind of an overbuild, but I think that's something we need to look at. I mean, just in general, one of the things that we really do when we're looking at a zoning amendment is trying to figure out where are all the other areas that it could have impact that we didn't think about.
Absolutely, and I know this is a work in progress as we move, and there's always changes to be made, so thank you very much.
Okay, there's no chair.
That's it.
He's back. Yeah.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. Want to come back to some things that I noticed in the budget detail, but before I get to that, I know during the street administration through, I believe, parts of that administration, there was a desire and goal to create a vacant property management information system, basically a database of the vacant property we have in the city. At one point, I recall that being worked on possibly by the land bank. Where is the status of that?
What did you say? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, I think you're asking about a database for the land?
Right, vacant property.
Vacant property, yeah, so that is our llama system today. It's something that we are rolling out a new website. When? Next week. So by the end of the month, we anticipate rolling out a new website that makes it easier to search and to identify what vacant properties are available that are publicly owned.
And so that would be property that are not only in the land bank, but owned by any of the city or city-related agencies like...
So what it's owned by public property,
IBA,
public property, the redevelopment authority, Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation, which still has a few properties, and then the land bank. That's what would be on that site.
Considering your additional collaboration with PHA, is there any desire to bring PHA into that fold?
So I think we are in conversation with them about that. It's a little tricky because their process actually involves federal approval. HUD has to approve any of the things that they do with their property. So how we coordinate that with our local structure it is a little tricky, but I think those are ongoing conversations we have with them. And regardless of whether those properties become available through the land bank, I think we want to make sure that we are coordinating with them and that they're coordinating with us. And actually, we do have some housing authority properties that we're kind of holding on to them in the land bank right now for the housing authority, but as far as bringing some of their vacant scattered sites in to our inventory, I think that's a discussion that's still ongoing.
Okay. Earlier in your testimony, you made reference to, I think, both 4% and 9% tax credit RFPs. Considering that there possibly could be some reduction of additional federal dollars going forward, do you think that would impact those RFPs at all?
So as I mentioned before, any change that would happen at the federal budget that would occur in the October 1, 2017 federal budget would not hit us until July 1, 2018. So the RFPs we're putting out now, those funds we believe are pretty secure, and so it should not have an impact on those RFPs.
In looking at your budget detail on both page 52, 67, and 72, I see allocations of reserve appropriations for Department of Housing and Community Development of different amounts for, like, for example, FY2017, about $20 million, and then going forward for various departments. Can you give me some perspective on what those reserve appropriations are for?
That's a rollover funds from prior years.
I had a feeling that was probably a rollover from prior time-plan years. So I guess are those dollars, because from my experience when I worked in the law department representing OECD, we have certain programs that we anticipate funding, but for whatever reason those programs don't get funded. So are those dollars already allocated or are being reserved? Because when you look at this whole issue of what may be the impact from the administration and zeroing out possibly or reducing the CDBG budget, are those dollars that could be used for making up the gaps for some of our programs like mortgage foreclosure and others?
I'm going to have our finance director answer.
Hi, Paul Paul Cesario, the Deputy Director of Finance. I don't have page 50.
So if you look at the bottom, page 52,
Right,
page
that's the home
67 and
program.
72. If you see the DHCD reserve
Associate program
appropriations,
Are you talking about the DHCD reserve appropriation?
correct.
Right, that's the home program. And that proration, of the 15 million, 8 million of it is currently under contract, at least as of the budget, and 7 million was a carry forward of unobligated.
Okay.
So,
And when you say unobligated, that's
not under contract.
not in the contract, but unobligated from a legal contractual perspective, but still obligated for funding for a specific program.
Correct.
Okay,
Sure.
like it was in the prior year, but we just don't have under contract. as of
There's
yet.
there's some prior plan activities that have not gone forward, that are in the pipeline,
Right.
that have not been obligated, so yes.
And that would be the
includes-
same for the information on page 67 and 72 as well?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome.
Just a couple more questions that I had. And I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about, we talked a lot about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing here in the city of Philadelphia. But the concern or the question that I have is also about the quality of that housing. And I know we have BSRP and we have, as you mentioned, there's going to be an event tomorrow, RFP tomorrow, to get more contractors in to do more BSRP work. But the state of Philadelphia housing and the age of it is, so old. We're a historic city. Housing has been around for a very long time in many of our neighborhoods. And so you have people who are paying rent, who are hanging on by a thread. You have people who are living, who own properties, who may own them outright but are utility poor. And so their focus is really on maintaining utilities and not on maintaining the property. They, may not just be able to do so. I think as district council members, we've probably all been inside of houses that we just really are in really, really bad shape. And I can think of one that I was in recently, and you think this is a house that really should probably be demolished, but you don't want to say that. That's someone's home. They live there. It's been their home for a very long time. In some cases, it's been generational, that this home has been passed down to family, and that the maintenance on it just really hasn't happened. So can you talk a little bit about not just the need for affordable housing, but the need for quality affordable housing, and also, how are we addressing that? Because
Right.
the need is just so overwhelming.
Yeah, right. So, as I mentioned before, over 70% of our housing stock is over 55 years old, and we combine that with our 26% poverty rate, and that's an issue. And then I think even for those folks that are over that poverty level that may not qualify for some of our grant programs, I think that's why we're looking at the loan program. And then we are also trying to investigate, is there a way for us to pool some dollars to provide some assistance to improve small landlord rental properties. Those are all things that we're looking at and trying to figure out how we can tackle some of those issues, and we're doing that in conjunction, because just as you mentioned, you don't want to walk into someone's home and say, oh my gosh, this home should actually probably be condemned and it's not livable. So we're working with L&I around code enforcement, but not necessarily code enforcement for displacement, right? We want to make sure we have some safety net in place before we start doing kind of blanket code enforcement, because we don't, again, just as we talked about, we don't want to be sort of the solution and the source of our problem at the same time.
Right.
We don't want to be the ones that are displacing people through code enforcement. So we are looking at how we could maybe seed a small landlord rental improvement program. We're also looking at, do we have the ability, again, working with the Office of Supportive Housing and the Housing Authority, if somebody needs to be displaced from their home for a short period of time to allow repairs to happen, is there a mechanism to allow for that? So those are all things that we're looking at to try to address some of those issues that you're raising.
Do we have a sense, and I'm not advocating for demolition, because I think that that's another problem. We have too many properties that we probably could have saved that we're quick to bring down. And when we bring them down, then there's issue with, what happens on the block, what happens in the neighborhood, what happens to the house next door that was attached to this particular property, and the damage that's often done to these properties. So in no way am I advocating for demolition. I just wanted to be clear on that. But really quickly, I wanted to ask, as we have identified with the rebuild program, we've identified the universe of sites here in the city of Philadelphia, what we think it would cost to bring those sites up to a particular standard. Have we done anything like that for housing standards in the city of Philadelphia? And looked at, what would it take to get our housing stock, knowing that, as you said, it's, 70% of it is, what was it?
55 years or older.
55 years or older, and much of it in need of significant maintenance. So has there been any thought to, as we're, undergoing a rebuild project, of thinking about this in the same vein and thinking, okay, we know that we've got this older housing stock. We know that BSRP really is just not enough, even though they do a fantastic job. It's just not enough. How do we realistically get in front of this to make these homes livable for our citizens?
Right. So much in the same vein as how rebuild started, and we hope to actually come visit, particularly all the district council members, and we'll get to all that large members as well. We're in the process of putting together not just data on that, but also information about a more comprehensive community development, because while we firmly believe that everything starts at home, if you will, we also know that it's important to have access to a job and access to a good education, access to health center, access to the facilities we're looking to improve with rebuild, the pre-K, all of that. And so we're trying to look at gather all that information and look at it holistically. But as part of that, yes, we can come up with what it would take to address all the vacant properties, what would it take to address all the occupied properties that are maybe not up to a certain level of housing quality. We can put that information together.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back. Or I can keep going? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I can keep going? Yeah,
No,
yes?
no. But it's only a couple. Councilman Heenan? You'll be back shortly.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a few questions regarding the zoning board. I could ask,
Yeah.
this is ZPA, right, today?
Yeah. She's not going anywhere. She's
Okay.
hiding, but she's not going anywhere.
Great. So there were some technical concerns about moving to ZBA because of shared staff. I think, as I recall, last year. How did we work around that? And were there any other staffing changes?
I think the CBA staff, which there are 5, is part of a larger unit in LNI, which does all of their boards that deal with the public. I think there might be 7, 9, I'm not sure the total. And they will continue to work with their other staff that's there. They will happen to just be relocated to 1515 Arch, but they will still maintain their relationships that they have with the existing staff. So we don't anticipate any major problems from them relocating.
Okay. How does an appeal get a calendar date?
The staff schedules it. The ZBA staff schedules it.
So when does a date get moved? So the staff moves the date themselves?
So I think they have somebody who does intake, who, if you come in to schedule an appeal, and they look at the calendar, see what's available, I think they schedule it at a certain time. That date can change if there's a continuance, which is requested by the appellant, or if the case is not moving forward and the board needs to continue it. And so then they'll move the date. But I don't believe they just move dates just to move dates. They schedule it, it's the date,
Okay.
and then it has to go through a continuance process if it needs to
Who
be
decides
changed.
who gets notified?
In terms of what?
In terms of ZBA, the dates, the changes,
So I
the
believe
notification
that
for the community. So there's several notifications.
Yeah,
there.
right.
All right.
So there's the orange poster, which
Right.
needs to be on site to indicate that there's a zoning board hearing at some point. There's the RCO notification process, which means the appellant gets a list of required addressees from the Planning Commission to send notifications out about the case or to hold a public meeting. So who decides, I mean, it's part of the what must be done during the process, so.
So I think the process could be improved a little bit by getting a calendar date solidified early on. So we know, and having that date made, I mean, possibly made part of the notification process.
It is.
So letters can go out to the applicants and the RCOs, so they have the calendar date. I
I
just
see
think
where
it'd be
you're going.
better
Yes.
coordination.
Yeah, I see, because sometimes they don't have the exact date, but they need to hold a public meeting, so it's not
Exactly.
always. Yeah,
Yes.
correct.
Exactly. So the
Yes.
notice goes out that, it is without a date certain. So it basically, hey, you're going to, here are the issues, here's the refusal.
But we don't know when
here's
the
but we
hearing
don't know
is.
We don't know when the schedule is. And additionally, when a hearing is rescheduled, all right,
That was quick.
is there nothing going out related to notification process that comes from the Planning Commission?
For the ZBA hearing?
For the Planning Commission themselves?
No, we don't send any notifications about the zoning board of adjustment hearings as a agency, no. We
Right.
don't.
So I think, just to clarify, when a appeal goes into the zoning board of adjustment, there is a notice that comes out from the planning commission
As
to
part
the
of the
RCOs.
As part of the RCO process.
That says, this is, that there's been an appeal filed,
Yeah.
right? And that you have to hold a public meeting and yada, yada, but sometimes it hasn't been given a calendar date at that time.
Correct.
Right? So I understand why there are notices that go out that don't have a calendar date because the calendar date is not known yet. I will say this, when Eleanor and I met with the ZBA staff last week, one of the things that was specifically mentioned, because the RCO process is administered by the Planning Commission, but the appeals process is administered by the Zoning Board of Adjustment, is that they were very much looking forward to having the ability to potentially coordinate those two processes better, and having both staffs in the same building so that they could work to really understand how these different processes work, so we can make sure that they're coordinated together as much as possible.
And it makes sense as,
Yeah.
we, I guess, find out some of the technical challenges along the way to coordinate with like that.
Right, and just if a calendar date is changed, the developer is required to repost, so they should get new orange posters that put up that shows the new date, and they should be re-notifying the RCO of the date.
Okay, I'll wait till other members unless there's time. I have two more questions.
We do have an issue with the interpreter. It has to leave at 1 o'clock
All right, real quick then. Are all the neighborhood letters considered at the hearings, at the ZBA hearings?
The ZBA is an independent board, so they are presented to the degree that they're considered or not considered. Your guess is as good as mine.
Right, so if the neighborhood group writes a letter to the ZBA staff or the chair of the zoning board, that's usually included in their information package that they have in front of them.
So from a legal standpoint, does the RCOs or neighborhood community organizations, when they submit a letter, again, from a legal perspective, do they have standing at the zoning board?
I don't know. I mean, what the zoning board is there to rule on is generally hardship. Who has standing and who, that's a legal question.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can get a legal answer on that.
Yeah.
And are there transcripts for the ZBA hearings?
Yes.
And are they available, and can somebody get access to them?
I think there's a cost.
I think there's a fee.
There's a
I think
cost
there are transcripts, because
they
it
have
is
to
a
produce
quasi-judicial proceeding. So there are transcripts. You have to request it, and I do believe there's a cost for it.
Okay. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to follow up on some questions that were made earlier regarding affordable housing, but also more specifically regarding housing opportunities of people that have physical and learning differences. Just yesterday, learned that we recently have a new ramp outside of City Hall to make City Hall more accessible, but I want to get a perspective of what are some of the policy goals and objectives of the Planning and Development Department regarding providing more housing opportunities for people that have physical or learning differences in the city.
Right. So with our housing dollars that we put out, we do require that projects are visitable, which means that, you know, the doorways have a width that folks that maybe need the assistance of a wheelchair, that they can access, that there's a bathroom on the first floor, that there's a zero-grade entrance. We also encourage that, well, actually, we require a certain percentage of the units are developed for folks that have some kind of challenge. And then we also, you know, we try to give points, additional points for folks who do over and above. I think, again, we all recognize that folks shouldn't be in a nursing home just because they're in a wheelchair or have some other kind of issue, that's not the most efficient way to house them. Again, this all comes down to a resource issue. You know, we promote that type of unit and that time of development, but unfortunately we can only support so many developments a year with the dollars that we have.
Yeah, I have some additional questions regarding Philadelphia nursing home, but in reference to, I mean, how many units would you say per year are specifically identified? I know you said visitability, but how many units per year, based on the units we're either helping to develop, are either identified people that have physical or learning differences or are quote-unquote visitable?
Councilman, I don't have the exact number. There is a requirement around the rules of 504 accessibility of a percentage, I believe it's 5% accessible units, and a designated percentage for the hearing impaired, but we can get those numbers for you.
Yeah, I mean, having in a prior experience worked in the law department, my understanding it's been 5% for a long time. I mean, it was 5% back when I was representing OECD. So I guess my question is, what steps are we taking to increase that percentage to a greater percent? Because 5% is a very small number.
Right. So just to clarify, we do 10% for physical issues, and then we do an additional, an additional 5% on top of that for hearing and vision impaired.
And so that number also brings back to my memory from being in the law department. I guess the question is, have we done any type of census or analysis in reference to the number of people in the city of Philadelphia that have physical or learning differences, where we try to get to the percentage to match or try to work towards a goal of matching the percentage of people living in our city that have, you know, physical learning differences to what we currently allocate on an annual basis?
Right. So that information is included in our assessment of fair housing as part of our affirmatively furthering fair housing plan, but we can get you the specific information about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome.
And I know we are short on time, so I'm going to ask my questions, and if we could get really
I can come
brief.
talk to you anytime.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. But I know my colleagues, I think a couple might have questions, so if we could have the answers just be really condensed. I just wanted to ask really quickly, one of the things that I have a concern about is conflicts of interest, not just in any one particular department, but I think across the spectrum here in the city of Philadelphia. And can you talk about, very briefly, what your office does to avoid conflicts of interest, particularly when it comes to developers, particularly developers who might be favored or might be better known? But, it's something that I think we see over and over again in city government. How do we avoid conflicts when it comes to planning, when it comes to development, when it comes to acquisition, all of these things?
Right, so I think the key there is one to have as transparent process as we possibly can. And then, like every other department, we have integrity officers within each of our agencies that if they see any issues, they report those to the integrity office. And then I think it's just incumbent on folks to, if there is a conflict, to announce the conflict and recuse themselves and make sure that they're not involved in any of those, in any of those chains, those authority chains or decision chains.
Okay, all right, very good. Number two, can you talk a little bit about how do we streamline development here in Philadelphia? Because, and because we're short on time, I'm not going to ask you to go through the entire process of development in the city of Philadelphia. And I know we have some tools like the land bank, which have been helpful, but it still takes way too long. I have the development of the Germantown Y that we've been trying to get off the ground. It's moving forward, but it's moving at a snail's pace.
Right. When I think
a dead snail's
right.
pace. It's moving very slowly.
Right. So just quickly, I think some of those issues are related to the development process in Philadelphia, and that's why we have development services to try to help work through those issues. And then some of those are related to market and financing. And sometimes it's difficult to be able to put together the sources of financing and everything, and it feels like it takes a long time. My good friend Cecilia Moyep used to say to people, how long you been working on it? And she'd say 5 years, and she said, great, you're about halfway through. I mean, and that's not what we're going for, but some of these projects are complicated, and the sources of financing and the layering, and unfortunately it takes some time.
Is that something that we do in the city of Philadelphia to help developers get over that hurdle? Do we help with helping them get pre-approved for projects, helping them, is that something that
the city
does to be helpful?
Really working to figure out how we can be creative about financing some of these things and helping folks out when we have the ability to do that, yes.
Is that something that's in the works by planning and development?
Say that again.
Is that something that you're actively working on?
Yeah, it's something we're actively working on. I mean, again, really quickly, just for example, the redevelopment authority was designed to have two major functions. One was land, one was financing. It really has not been in the financing business for a number of years. We are trying to figure out how we kind of get it back into the line so that it has the ability to do more creative financing.
Okay. And really quick, one other question. In terms of what triggers an EOP in the development process. And I guess what my question is what do you think about an EOP being a part of the development process during the RCO phase? So when a developer is meeting with an RCO, that they would have to provide their EOP to that RCO, so basically to the community, so that people would know what the plan is, what kind of diversity they should expect to see on a site. I almost believe that people are so used to seeing work sites that are not diversified that they don't expect to see diversity on a site. And maybe bringing the EOP up earlier in the development process with the community could help address that.
I think that's probably a question that the developers should address. I think sometimes when they're at the community meeting, I think it depends on where they are in the development process. I would like to encourage developers to go to the community sooner as opposed to later, and the development may not be far enough along to have a fully formed EOP, but I do think that they should be prepared to address some of those questions.
Is that something that you would be open to having as a regulation, that an EOP should be included in the RCO process, even if it's not as fully fleshed out as people would like for it to be, but that there would be something that would be provided that would tell people, I'm going to do this particular amount of local hiring, this,
Right.
percentage of diversity and women and,
I actually think that that's I'm not trying to avoid, but I do think that that's a larger discussion, because I think, honestly, that there's probably things that could be done with EOP to make it more effective than just percentages. And so I think that's something that we'd be willing to talk to you about.
would
and
that
trying
be
to
one,
figure
would that be one of the components, though? If you want to make the EOP more effective, would having it being presented at an RCO meeting to people in the community, would that be one of the things that you would think, one of the elements that would make it more productive, more impactful?
Honestly, it's something I need to think about, to be honest with you.
Can we do a call back? Can you give us some thought, and we'll do a call back on that?
Yeah, I think, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. I think it's something we got to look at and figure out what makes sense based on, where a development project is in the process within at the point where it talks within RCO, and then, what size of the project is, so that it would have a meaningful EOP plan or a meaningful EOP component. But I think, yes, working to figure out how we can maximize diversity in these projects is definitely something that we want to work on.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. So I'm going to be quick because I know we have to take a recess. Just a couple questions. I noticed that there isn't a itemized budget for the land bank from the mayor's proposed budget, but I do know you're asking for an increase from $450 to $850, $400,000 increase, which I think is great for the work that the land bank is trying to do. But can you give us a brief synopsis of what that $400,000 is going to be utilized for with the land bank?
So essentially, we put...
I still have a couple
I'm
questions
sorry.
I want to get out so you can answer. And then also, I want to take a look at if you would support strategic acquisitions beyond that 500 cap that we have right now. And I know it takes some funding behind to help you all reach your goals. Because one of my biggest fears is market rate housing is booming. Private development is going to be moving forward, but because of the lack of resources, it's hard for us to keep pace on affordable workforce and low-income housing side. And hopefully at some point in time, we're not, the scarcity of land, public land, is available where that balance totally shifts toward all market rate and just a small slither of affordable and workforce housing. So I want to get an idea of, your strategy to go beyond that 500 cap that we have. And do you also support the tax lien securitization proposal that's right now in front of the administration regarding the buying up of delinquent liens from residential homeowners?
Okay. All right. So if memory serves me, the first question is about the land bank dollars and the additional dollars in the budget. So yeah, we asked for an increase in the budget because as land comes into the land bank, there's more cost to the land bank because we have to maintain those, and then and right now we are required to also pay sewer and water fees associated with those. I know there's something in the works that we wouldn't have to pay those fees, but right now we do, and we also have to insure them.
On
So
city-owned land.
yes, so just ensure.
So we charging our own
Yes.
administration.
Yes, so just for insurance and maintenance, as we bring properties into the land bank, the cost escalates. Your next question was about dollars for acquisition. So right now, we have about 395 properties on hold. The cost to acquire all of those based on the current mechanism that's being talked about, which is that we would have to pay taxes, penalty, and interest, as well as water department liens, taxes, and interest, will cost us just shy of $3 million. The total to purchase the 268 that have been approved by the board of those 395 would be about $1.7 million. And I believe you asked me something else, and I'm sorry, I
The
can't
last one
remember.
was a proposal for the tax lien securitization.
You know what?
That's in front of-
Again, I am not fully versed on that, to be quite honest with you, but again, I think we do have concerns similar to what happened in the 1997 lien sale, in that we still have too many of those properties that are encumbered and are in limbo right now. And I think until we can understand that issue won't happen again, that we would have some concerns.
So I do want to put you on a record, at least for a conversation, because you are the head planner for the city of Philadelphia. The collection of the delinquent taxes, which we support, but also not at the expense of homeowners, there has to be a conversation with the Revenue Department. The proposal that's being put in front of the mayor right now to kind of see what's the middle ground, or even if we even move forward with that particular proposal. And so we know what happened in the early 1990s. We understand the importance of collecting delinquent taxes. We also want to do it in a way that's fair. So it's good to hear your perspective, because I would think, prior to me hearing your testimony today, that this is like proposals moving forward. It's great for the city of Philadelphia. And I think yourself being the lead planner here as it relates to housing and development plays a vital role in this conversation. And so just want to thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Councilman. We will. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
I heard you. Councilwoman Quinones had to leave, but her question was, which she left with Councilman Johnson and myself, is the city's tax lien sale in 1997 had an enormous impact on the city's capacity to develop over 5,000 properties. Can you commit to reaching out to U.S. Bank and their servicer, Linebarger, to discuss what it would take for the city to reclaim those liens?
Right. So, again, to reiterate, I think what we realize is that we're in limbo with those properties, and I believe that, yes, we will commit to talking with the Revenue Department about what their approach is to deal with that in U.S. Bank.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We're going to be calling you back on one of the callback days, and I'd ask that you please bring the Art Commission, particularly members of the board, with you to discuss an issue that you're aware of. So thank you for your testimony today. You've been helpful.
Thank you.
We're going to take like a 10-minute recess before we go to mural arts and give the stenographer a chance to deal with some issues. Thank you.